Hello, friends. Welcome to Empty Cloud Monastery. Today we're going to study, or rather than study, read and discuss the Dutiya Garava Sutta, Anguttara Nikaya 5.22. I will be putting right now in just a moment the link on Sutta Central for the sutta. And before we begin, we can start by paying homage to our original teacher, Shakyamuni Buddha, the reason why we're all gathered here today. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Namo tassa bhagavato arahato samma sambuddhassa. Buddham dhammam sangham namassami. And hello, Michael, John, Sud, Rick, Jayanta, Usha, and all the other friends who are checking in right now. So we can start by reading the sutta since it's rather short. And I will be reading from Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, but in the link that I put there, you have the option both for Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation and for Bhante Sujato's translation as well. So the sutta begins. Monastics. When a monastic is irreverent and undeferential, and their behavior is uncongenial to their fellow monks, it is impossible for them to fulfill the factor of proper conduct. Without fulfilling the factor of proper conduct, it is impossible for them to fulfill the factor of a trainee. Without fulfilling the factor of a trainee, it is impossible for them to fulfill the aggregate of virtuous behavior. Without fulfilling the aggregate of virtuous behavior, it is impossible for them to fulfill the aggregate of concentration. Without fulfilling the aggregate of concentration, it is impossible for them to fulfill the aggregate of wisdom. But monastics, when a monastic is reverential and differential, and their behavior is congenial to their fellow monastics, it is possible for them to fulfill the factor of proper conduct. Having fulfilled the factor of proper conduct, it is possible for them to fulfill the factor of a trainee. Having fulfilled the factor of a trainee, it is possible for them to fulfill the aggregate of virtuous behavior. Having fulfilled the aggregate of virtuous behavior, it is possible for them to fulfill the aggregate of concentration. Having fulfilled the aggregate of concentration, it is possible for them to fulfill the aggregate of wisdom. Pretty clear, isn't it? Someone in Ramatico just nodded. Yes, very clear, very clear. So kind of a bit, I have to say, slightly changed Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi's translation, but only in terms of the monastics, making it a little bit gender neutral. But other than that, we kept the exact terminology that he used for this translation. So just to rewind a little bit. So the Buddha here obviously is giving us a bit of a teaching of dependent origination. We tend to think of dependent origination as this kind of like sometimes abstruse, very like philosophical complex thing, but actually pretty much the teachings of dependent origination is that everything is dependently arisen. Everything is interconnected. So if we want a particular result, we need to put certain pieces of the puzzle together, and then we'll get the puzzle. Or certain ingredients together, and then we'll have a cake, right? It's exactly the same thing. So the cake is dependently arisen from the flour, the eggs, if you're making a non-vegan cake, or chia seeds, if you're making a vegan cake, and so forth, right? And other sugar, etc., whatever are the ingredients of the recipe. So it's very important to keep that in mind and understanding why all of these different factors and precepts and also habits that we have within Buddhist monasteries or Buddhist environments or Buddhist teachings. Why are they there? What is the purpose for them? And sometimes, we can come with all, our different baggages. Maybe sometimes they're cultural baggages. Maybe sometimes they are our religious of birth baggage. Maybe there are aversions. Maybe there are likes and dislikes and so forth. And we can very quickly dismiss certain very important aspect of the path, dismissing them, either taking them, through the lenses of what we're used to within our culture and kind of giving them the same weight or the same value. For example, certain forms like bowing, certain forms like paying respects. Here at the monastery, actually, we were joking the other day that we're constantly bowing. Our new resident was like, okay, so we bow when we come in the hall, and then we bow when we leave the hall. like, yeah, and you just arrived. There's going to be more bowing than that. Don't worry. Yeah, we bow to statues, we bow to people. It can be sometimes a little bit overwhelming. And there's certain also kind of, religious garments, religious iconography, and so forth. So we can perhaps also put all of this within the domain. I certainly had done that several years ago, under the domain of like religious trappings, under the domain of like, oh, okay, yeah, that reminds me of Catholicism. Okay, well, that's religious and whatever. Maybe I don't necessarily need to delve too deeply into that. What are the other like kind of juicy, more interesting aspects of Buddhism that instead are more worthwhile, more worthy of investing time and effort into it. But when we have that approach, which is completely natural and normal, by the way, it's nothing to be ashamed of, we're missing out on a big aspect actually of the Buddhist teachings. And at least this has been my experience of, wasting a lot of time in focusing on what I thought was the important aspects of the path. And after a while having to kind of go like, hey, why is this not really working as much as I would want it to work? And then actually going back to the tradition, going back to the inheritance that we have after 2,500 years of finding all these supports on the path. And so when it comes to here, of course, this sutta is directed towards monastics, but it's pretty much applicable to anyone who is trying to develop the qualities that lead towards awakening. And so even if a layperson is irreverent and undeferential and their behavior is uncongenial to their fellow lay people, it is impossible for them to fulfill the factor of proper conduct. Yeah, that's pretty much, I think, quite obvious, right? And impossible for them to fulfill the factor of a trainee. So one of the aspects, the seka is actually the Pali word for that has been translated as trainee here. And in the commentaries, it's defined as a stream enterer. And I actually don't find any reason to contradict the commentaries. It seems to me that it's pretty much, definitely in a lot of suttas so far that I've seen, maybe not exactly like said, oh, the seka is the stream enterer, but it seems like it gives me the impression that that is what the Buddha is referring to. And so, of course, stream enter, which is that beautiful, irreversible condition that we all should aim for, because after that, then it's all very easy. very predictable in a good way. So yeah, what has a stream enter done? What has a stream enter accomplished that others haven't? Well, they have removed the three main fetters. So the fetter of, or better, actually, they have developed, let's put it in the positive, they have developed this full, complete faith in Buddha, Dhamma, and Sangha. So not that blind faith, nor that kind of maybe skeptical, maybe the Buddha might be right, or maybe this path is like worth practicing it, and maybe actually develops some awakened beings. So neither of those, neither the blind faith that we're not kind of experiencing, but rather it's something that we see, that we taste, right? Like when we drink water and it, that's great, very refreshing. We taste it, we have a taste for it. So then of course we have faith that that water is it's refreshing, it's soothing, it removes thirst from our experience. We have the awareness, we have the lived experience of it. And then of course through that we also have a proper use of rites and rituals, or of observances, however, practices and observances, however is our translation, favorite translation. So understanding that basically just by practicing precepts, we won't attain awakening, but practicing precepts is a means to attain awakening. And we understand the purpose, why they're there, what is the place within the path. And then the most hard, we have our first realization of anatta, of the impersonality of all things. Not conceptually, not just partially, but actually experientially, no different than as everything that we've said so far, no different than knowing the quality of wetness of the water. It's not that anyone has to describe it. We know it, we experience it, we see it. So, yeah. Why does the Buddha says that without fulfilling the factor of proper conduct, without fulfilling, essentially without being reverent and deferential, this is unattainable to us. Yeah, it's a very good question. We should always be questioning. Why are these teachings there? What are they aiming at? What are they pointing at? And of course, we see that, historically in the tradition, it's not that we only need to develop samadhi and panya, but there's always the sila, samadhi, and panya. And it's actually like this incredible, precious part of the path that is very emphasized in traditional Asian Buddhism. And it's very similar, I would say, to agriculture. These days we focus a lot on, we've been focused a lot in the past years on what we're planting in the soil. But actually, you can have the greatest seeds, you can have the greatest plants, but if the soil is not nourished, well, the plant will be at best stunted, or it won't actually grow at all. But instead, if you have like a kind of crappy seed and a half-dying plant, and you put it in some really great soil and water, the results will be quite impressive. And so, I like to think of it precisely as this incredible soil that, just like today, is very depleted worldwide because we've destroyed most of the of the fertile soul that requires actually countless lifetimes, countless generations in order to really nourish and have a very fertile soil. It doesn't happen overnight. It's the same in the same way. It takes quite a long time to actually purify, to perfect our sila. And yeah, one of the reflections that we always do here at Empty Cloud, because we've seen it throughout the years, is how, perhaps you can find so many people who have been practicing for 20 years, 30 years, 40 years meditation. It was really it really like impressed me in especially in Rockaway when we were doing retreats back to back every week. And so like we would have people that would come, and it was still sometimes like very, of course, some people were pretty good at meditation, but a lot of them were like just struggling a lot, kind of like they had just started to a certain degree. And then you would find someone who, our friends, I remember from Burma or Thailand or wherever, that maybe had meditated once or twice when they were like adolescents, and now they were in their 40s, and they were like, okay, let me come and do this retreat so I can make merit for my parents or my family, or this, or just, purify my sila even better. And I was like, oh, surely, they're going to struggle, and they're like rocks. um, I was so stunned. I was so impressed how that was possible. The very first time I thought, this might be kind of an exception to the rule. And then the second exception to the rule, and then the third exception to the rule. I'm like, wait, there's a pattern here. How is it possible that, people who have never meditated or have meditated for such a brief point or very long ago can have such an easy time when sitting and not having that learning curve that I definitely had when I first started. I still have. And it's so very interesting to see how much then you see in traditional Buddhist temples, how little emphasis actually usually there is on meditation practice, and how much more emphasis there is on on dana, on sila, and on letting go in a very primordial way, letting go of possessions by training your mind since you're essentially born into giving gifts to others, into caring for others, into there's one of our resident monastics now that is having some health issues, and so they need the lay people heard that he needs some proteins. Now there's like the kitchen full of it, stacked with protein powder, protein shakes, protein this, protein that. But how beautiful is that? Not necessarily the object itself, but that mind state, that of caring, of really wanting to help, of really nurturing that beautiful, beautiful heart. Like it didn't even take them a second. They like kind of rushed, like, oh, let's take care of the sangha. It's just so beautiful, such a beautiful quality of mind, beautiful, beautiful quality of the heart. Makes you also understand why usually, in the West, whenever they ask us, where is the mind? And we kind of go like this. And then the average Asian person, you ask, where is the mind? And they're like, so there's something very beautiful when Buddhist culture is in, when Buddhism, the teachings of the Buddha are embedded in the culture, and you have something like Buddhist culture, which is drenched with all these beautiful, beautiful teachings. So, as we see, then the Buddha says, without fulfilling all of these factors, it is impossible to fulfill the factor of a trainee. And without fulfilling the factor of a trainee, it is impossible for them to fulfill the aggregate of virtuous behavior. And so what is virtuous behavior? And how is it different, for example, from proper conduct? So virtuous behavior, my understanding is that in other suttas, actually, the Buddha defines it as essentially being restrained by the precepts, by seeing danger in minor faults. We see throughout the suttas how the Buddha praises actually this incredible virtuous conduct that one would have, even actually when one is very realized. That perhaps we would think, okay, well, they've done what they have done, they needed to do. Well, they actually still dwell in that way, including the Buddha, out of compassion to show others the proper conduct. And so then knowing how to, if we're monastics, knowing how to be content with the requisites that we're being given, whether it's the food, whether we like it or not, being content, having a mind of gratitude. The robes, whether we like them or not, whether they're cotton or polyester, whether they're stiff, coarse, or they're soft and smooth, doesn't matter. We're content. We see that the purpose for it is just to, cover the body, offer us some shelter, some protection from all the different creatures and from the elements, essentially, from the cold or from the heat, also in the summer as well. And actually, one of the qualities that also he describes is being pleasant to live with. Actually, who really comes to mind is our friends. I'm seeing our friend Katie here, and so we met Katie in Seattle. So now I'm thinking about Ajahn Kavilo and Ajahn Nisabo, who are precisely the definition of monastics, who are really easy to live with, really pleasant to live with, really pleasant to have around. They have really mastered actually these beautiful qualities of mind. Very lucky, Katie, to have them around. And are completely dedicated to following the Noble Eightfold Path. So for themselves and for the sake of others, and also at the same time repulsed to do anything that is in the domain of bad conduct. Anything that is that could be through body, speech, and mind. So mind that is guided by Hierarchical. That we don't even have to remind ourselves, but we're like, that's not killing. Why would I ever do such a thing? Stealing? Are you crazy to suggest such a thing? Right? It just becomes kind of like not even second nature. Maybe at the very beginning it becomes second nature, and then it becomes first nature. It's the only nature that we have. And another beautiful thing that actually the Buddha describes over and over again is that also, a monastic also shows their faults and defects. That's always praised. Actually, like, this is what I need to work on. Not pretending that one is perfect, but rather being completely transparent. Because when one is transparent, then actually, first of all, there is that kind of immediate field of trust, right? Nobody's pretending to do anything, but we're actually all supporting each other on the path. So we're not aiming to fake perfection, but rather we're aiming to develop perfection. And so if we're aiming to develop perfection, then we also must acknowledge how imperfect we are. And also have a clear awareness of, what still needs to be developed, what is not really going precisely there. Where is our greed? How is our greed manifesting? How is our hatred manifesting? How is our delusion manifesting? And it's also less personal. Like, oh, I'm not the evil person that um, craves the moon cakes on the table. But rather it's, yeah, of course, that's dependently arisen from cultivating a lot of craving for moon cakes in the past. So of course there is this effect of finding the mooncake delicious or very appealing right now on the table. We just had mooncakes for breakfast. so so yeah, it's okay. There's nothing to be ashamed about. But it can be acknowledged, seen, and going, I'm still struggling with mooncake addiction, or or whatever it is for each one of us, and it's okay. Yeah, and then of course from that, it's all dependently arisen. So fulfilling the aggregate of concentration and fulfilling the aggregate of wisdom. And actually, there is a beautiful sutta in the Anguttara Nikaya 373, where essentially um, we see how both the aggregate of concentration and the aggregate of wisdom are defined. And the former is the four jhanas, and the latter is actually understanding the Four Noble Truths. And we see that, of course, that's essential. That's basically the whole path that we need to realize right here, right there, not intellectually, but experientially. So this is suffering. This is the cause of suffering. This is the end of suffering, and this is the way out of suffering. And I see a few questions actually coming up. So maybe I'll start by reading those, and we'll take it from there. Michael says, is essential to even starting out on the path. Just so being respectful is a foundation of practice without which we can't even begin. Is that maybe a way to look at this sutta? Depends on what you mean by starting out on the path. So starting out on the path in terms of as we were saying, as a stream enter, yes, absolutely. Actually, we can't even start. It's not that it's not after the starting, but we can't even start. But in terms of, I would say, just starting the practice as we speak, then of course, there's time to develop pretty much everything. And wherever we start is a good start. And understanding what needs to be worked on and the different wrong views that we have is just also part of the path. It's part of the First Noble Truth, essentially, understanding that there is dukkha, that there is suffering. And a lot of it is really like self-produced in the sense of like in a very bizarre way. Like we really have so many different ideas of what is correct and what is wrong, and what we like and what we dislike, that we are just not trained to question our way of our line of thinking. And so, for example, actually I just gave a talk a while back, both on this channel on the Buddhist hierarchy, because it was something that I was had been thinking for quite some time, but also for our friends at Anukampa in the UK last Sunday. We spoke precisely about that, the hierarchy in Buddhism, and how we can, perhaps as Westerners, definitely here in America, there's many concepts of equality and a horizontal society and so forth. And definitely we have that also in Europe and Italy, maybe less accentuated in the sense that we definitely have certain traditional hierarchies, certain ways of relating to people that maybe are significantly less informal than in the USA. But still, very much, I would say, Western culture has similar principles. So when we get into a framework like the one in Buddhism, at the very beginning, I was shocked. I still remember the first day when I went to a Sri Lankan temple to visit Bhante Sudhaso, and this Sri Lankan man kissed his feet, and I was shocked. It's like, how is it possible that they're kissing the feet of this young monk, that in my mind, he was in his, actually back then he was in his late 20s, and this man was like probably 60 or 70 years old. So it was also kind of backwards according to my cultural framework, where we don't kiss anyone's feet. But then I was like, well, if anyone has to kiss one's feet, it should be at least according to age. Not the old person kisses the young person. So we have all sorts of ideas. And the bowing, I was like, all right, this is a little bit intense, this bowing to both inanimated objects and also animated objects. A bit too much. And so how do we reconciliate those things? So sometimes we just dismiss them without actually contemplating what is the message behind it, and that's unskillful. And sometimes we also take them in without questioning them altogether, which is also unskillful, because not everything that the tradition brings is 100% what the in accordance with the teachings of the Buddha, nor it's 100% against the teachings of the Buddha. So it's always important, as the Buddha encourages us to do over and over again, the Kalama Sutta, in the advice to Sandaka and so forth, to really investigate everything, not to go just blindly by tradition, but to investigate everything, what is in accordance with Dhamma. It's also the teachings of Ajahn Chah. They're always about that. That some things are true, but wrong, not in line with Dhamma. Right? So some things can be, just not, even though, it's good to have an equal society. Nobody is really inherently superior or inferior, etc. But it's actually like not terribly supportive for the practice of Dhamma. It's also remarkable when the Buddha attained awakening. That was one of his first reflections. He was like, oh, damn, now that I'm like the most awesome, who do I pay respects to? Like as an actual, matter of fact, he's like, wait, and it's not really good in the holy life not to have anyone to respect to. And then he's like, oh, well, of course, well, it wouldn't be appropriate for me to respect anyone, but I have the Dhamma to respect. So he essentially, you can say, he takes refuge into the Dhamma. An enlightened being like the Buddha. Incredible. But why does he do that reflection? To understand, to put that in place, to give us the teaching of how important it is to hold up to some forms, to rely on some forms, so that we create the conditions for this, for the heart to open up, to nourish, and to really develop good, wholesome mind states. And we see actually how also, for example, these hierarchical, if we may call them, structures in Buddhism, when we encounter really developed practitioners, they hold them in such a beautiful way. My favorite story is always the one when Ajahn Pasanno came to visit here, and Ajahn Pasanno is around 47 vasas, something like that. So it's very difficult to find someone who is more senior than him. So usually everybody pays respects to Ajahn Pasanno. But when he came to visit here, we went to visit Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi, who happens to be one vasa more senior than Ajahn Pasanno. And Ajahn Pasanno was so much looking forward to pay respects to Bhikkhu Bodhi, to Venerable Bhikkhu Bodhi. And he was so delighted when he had that opportunity. It was like the first thing. I mean, we weren't even like outside of the car, almost. He was paying respects. Really looking forward to that. Like, beautiful. Now I finally get to be in this form. It was such a beautiful teaching. I remember going, oh yeah, I'm so lucky, I'm so lucky that in junior I get to pay respects all the time. That's lovely. That's wonderful. But normally we have it all backwards. We're like, oh, can't wait until I'm up on the top, right? We tend to think of like, abbot positions of power, or whatever it is. Like, when are we getting the title of a Jan, or when is my 10th vasa if you're in the Thai forest tradition, or whatever it is. And it's just getting it all wrong. Well, first of all, if one wants to have that career, definitely monastic life is full of dukkha. So definitely here at Empty Cloud, we have New York City. So that's always my consideration. I'm like, okay, if I want a career, that's much more fun than at Empty Cloud Monastery. But yeah, really remembering why these forms are there and how they're such beautiful opportunities. We always want to be surrounded by people who are more senior than us if we have the opportunity. That's definitely like my objective. Anyway, that was a long story, very long. So in the meanwhile, some other comments have appeared. Rick says, in my experience, offering respect seems like a beautiful practice of generosity, humility, and kindness. Do you have any reflections on this practice? Absolutely. Yeah, it's definitely a big practice of humility. That's one of the incredible qualities that we need to develop. So bowing, prostrating, the whole act of the body, and hopefully of the mind. Maybe usually it starts with the body, and then the body kind of gives hints to the mind, and then the mind after a while, after a bit of resistance, follows suit and actually also bows in that way, in that beautiful way. So yeah, it's definitely there embedded to be a practice of humility, a practice of gentleness, a practice of humbleness, and of kindness. In Asian cultures, in fact, one also bows to, at least in traditional Asian cultures, Buddhist cultures, one also bows to, for example, their parents. I remember when we were visiting Thailand with a good friend of ours, it was her birthday at a certain point, and we were visiting her family, and she bowed to her dad because it was her birthday. So it was a way of paying respects to her family, to her father. I thought it was really beautiful. They have a way of really sharing it, and some Sri Lankan friends as well. Like, they always like wash the feet of the parents, and also of the monastic sangha. Actually, that's across all Buddhist cultures. And then, obviously, on whoever is on the receiving end, there's also the practice of humility as well, of humbleness, of first of all understanding that all of these practices are not done to us because we are great as individuals, but rather because essentially one puts this robe on, becomes the emblem of the sangha. So the sangha as the Mahasangha, not just the sangha of Empty Cloud, the three monks, not whoever we think. It's not about us, essentially, but rather it's creating those opportunities for people to make merit. And it's very difficult to remember that, to reflect on that, and two things can happen. Either we feel very, look at all these minions like bowing, or look at like, oh, all these people serving me, which is that conceit of superiority that's disgusting. It's a horrible mind state that is an impediment towards awakening. Or there is, on the other hand, the, oh, I am not worthy of all this generosity. Oh, I am terrible. That was me. when I had first ordained for a while, I was struggling a lot. Like, oh no, 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 please don't worry, don't disturb yourself. I can do it by myself. I'm still someone 80, I can cook and do it myself. So also that is very unskillful. It's not understanding once again that people are not donating to you as a single individual. But there is the practice of generosity, of kindness, of allowing people to give, to make merit. You know, in order to practice generosity, there has to be someone who is receiving. You know, we have lots of, like, for example, furniture in the from the previous occupants of the monastery. We have lots of furniture in the garage that we would like to give away, but nobody will take it. So, you know, you can, even though we want to be generous, no, we can practice generosity, right? So there's not the factor of the recipient. And so that's one of the things, actually, that as monastics, we make our life very convenient in order to become vehicles of generosity, and at the same time practice contentment and gratitude and so forth. So it's very symbiotic how the Buddha designed this relationship. It's very beautiful. And Sud says, do you think sila can be summed up in practice of 10 wholesome actions, or is there something more than that? I mean, it can also be summed up in 311 precepts, or it can be summed up in commentaries. It can be summed up in so many different ways. So people have so many different different ways. So I would like, I like to think of it in terms of wholesome mind states. So rather than in the actions per se, what are the results that we're producing? And and kind of base our contemplation with that type of information. Could you share with us what led you to dedicate your life as a Buddhist nun, please? Well, I'll say that I actually do not like the term Buddhist nun. Nun is a Catholic word. So even though I love my Catholic friends, I don't think it's an appropriate word for Buddhism. I don't know how it ever entered it. You know, I feel like it's kind of, then if we have to use terms for other religions, I'd rather go, I'm a Buddhist imam, or I'm a Buddhist rabbi. It's good. So what led me to dedicate my life as a bhikkhuni, which is probably the term that you were looking for. And disclosure, as a translation, at Empty Cloud, we use monk as gender neutral. So whenever you hear me use the word monk or monastic, unless it's male or female specified, it's to be considered as gender neutral. What led me to dedicate my life? The precepts. I love precepts. So I just saw how they were making a big impact in my mind whenever I was taking them in accordance with tradition. So I started wrapping them up. I really love it. Yeah. And Michael says, starting out means foundational to me. Yes, I think we covered it. Absolutely. And Michael also asks, if you offer a gift in good faith, but the gift is not accepted, doesn't your intention constitute generosity? I would think intention is the point. Yes, absolutely. Yeah. Also, if we give the gift of anger, for example, our intention is not particularly wholesome. So even if it's not accepted, we still have accumulated some bad karma points. So it's very important to really look at our intentions. And actually, the Buddha, whenever we're giving something, he recommends to look at our mind before, during, and after. So we want to have a very good intention before giving a gift, then really having a good time while giving it, going like, yay! And then also afterwards recollecting our own goodness and going, yeah, that was a really good deed. That's great. All right. And that was the last comment, unless anyone here has any comments. All right, pretty self-explanatory. All right, so if you have any questions, you're welcome to bring them this evening for a monk chat. We will have a special bhikkhuni friend, Venerable Santa Citta from Aloka Vihara in California. And yeah, you'll have great opportunity to ask her questions. Oh, but Scott has one comment. It seems that frequently labels are used to motivate. Oh, sorry. It seems that frequently labels are used motivated by greed, hatred, and delusion. In your practice, how have you dealt with labels? What kind of labels? Because, for example, the label of this is a desk, for example. I mean, it's a label, but it's a useful convention to understand what we're talking about. Or this is a cup, it's also a label. But it will be very difficult to communicate with others if we don't use conventions and labels. Others, yeah, might have, I don't know, if you want to elaborate further, then maybe I can actually address which labels you're talking about. How should we interact with others in positions of authority who act in unskillful ways? Asks Rick. Well, if you can avoid them, I would recommend avoid them. So it's very important not to be I don't know if neutral is the correct word, but the Buddha is actually pretty comfortable, it seems to me, throughout the suttas to declare what is wholesome conduct and what is unwholesome conduct. So we can maybe, instead of personalizing it, we can just acknowledge, okay, this is a skillful action and this is an unskillful action. We'll see that a lot of people, whether they're in position of authority or in position of, what's the opposite of authority? Unauthority. Inferiority. I don't know. Well, non-authority. So they will act in unskillful ways, and they will act in skillful ways. So everybody is kind of like a jumble, right? Whoever is not fully awakened will have ways in which they're skillful and ways in which they are unskillful. And we tend to always focus on one or the other. So we kind of like go like, oh, that person is skillful and that person is unskillful. And then when the skillful person acts unskillfully, we're completely shocked. And if the unskillful person does something skillful, we completely dismiss it altogether. But if instead we actually look at their actions, kusala and akusala, I think it makes it a little bit more objective, and it personalizes it too. So we can have that attitude. I train my mind to do that as much as possible. And so that way I can benefit from a lot of people's work, for example, that might, also be completely opposed to my existence in the world, for example, as a bhikkhuni, and be quite eloquent of it. But then actually they might also have lots of incredible contributions to this world where I can learn more Dhamma from. So I'm like, well, if I focus only on their perhaps unskillful actions towards my condition, then I would also be missing out on all the good kusa actions that they're doing. So it's good to, I find it helpful to distinguish the two and take what is good. Now, if there is a really unskillful conduct that is very harmful, then I just try to remove myself from it. And I also have no problem saying that is, yeah, unskillful, or that's skillful, so to speak. So I hope that answered your question. Actually, have a follow up. Do we show respect to the position even though the person may not be unwholesome in act, word, and deed? So I don't like these absolute questions because I don't feel like there's one size fits all. It really depends on, it's circumstantial. There are so many different factors and causes and conditions. So sometimes there will be the conditions where our practice should just be it's a practice of humility, regardless of the person that we have in front. And sometimes, well, we should just not put ourselves there in the first place, and leave. But the thing is that we have so many lists of like, oh, I like, there's no problem in paying respects to a Jampasano, or have no problem paying respects to Ajahn Brahm. Oh, they're great. But I don't like that other bhikkhu. That bhikkhu, like I saw him eat way too many mooncakes breakfast. So I was actually a lot more restrained. So I'm not going to like pay respects to that bhikkhu, because actually the bhikkhu should pay respects to me or whatever. So that's when we become very, very, very unskillful. And in that case, yeah, our practice should not be to do the practice of the bhikkhu. Our practice should not be to go and see how restrained or unrestrained they are with the mooncakes at breakfast. But rather, our practice should be to focus on removing our defilements. Our practice should be to develop wholesome mind states. And what comes to mind is Uga the householder, one of my favorite suttas, as I always say, who is reputed to be a non-returner, if I remember correctly, in the suttas. And he, I love it because in the suttas, the also lay people, they're very happy with their accomplishments. So they're not like, they don't have the fake humbleness, like, oh yeah, I'm just like everyone else, nothing special. No, they're like, oh, I'm awesome. Look at me. I am a non-returner. Let me tell you, like, the great qualities of mine that I have developed. I have many. So these are the wonderful qualities that I have. And Uga, in two different suttas, he highlights two that I feel are relevant. One is that since he's so awesome, he has both devas that tell him like, oh, that monastic, their sila is such and such, and that monastic is very good in their conduct. That other one is lazy and slacks off, and their concentration is not that great. So devas come and tell him, but also he can read the minds of others, so he can also like see it, like, oh, look at, I see your mind like full of like all those greedy thoughts, etc. But look at you, you're so pure, etc. And he's like, even though I have this like incredible ability, I give the same amount of food to each one of the monastics, no problem. Then the other great quality is, oh, when a monastic comes to me, even though he is a non-returner, so perhaps a monastic is not even a stream enterer, so he's ahead of them on the path. It's like, when a monastic comes to me, I first listen to if they have any Dhamma, if they have a Dhamma talk that they will share with me. And if they don't say anything, then I will give them a Dhamma talk out of compassion. I remember I was just so amazed. I was like, oh God, how beautiful. Even though he's such a developed, enlightened being, there is no conceit of superiority. There's only this big humbleness, humility, and also respect for the Sangha as being the third jewel. So the respect of the monastic form. So once again, even though he is quote unquote better, superior, he will still pay respects. He will still listen to whatever kind of Dhamma talk the monastic has to share. And then out of compassion, not out of like, oh, you minion, let me explain to you the real Dhamma, but rather out of compassion. If the monastic doesn't tell him anything, he will give him a Dhamma talk. So we see that's basically what we want to aim at, whether we're a monastic or a layperson. We want to aim at having those incredible attitudes and qualities of mind. And so that is our work. We always focus on other people's work, but we should focus on doing our work first. And Scott said, so the labels are for individuals. Yeah, I'm not quite sure what you mean. There's so many labels that we can use. Professor, monk, or derogatory terms. And the derogatory terms, they're absolutely based out of greed, hatred, and delusion. So yeah, we can point that out. Doesn't fulfill the factor of right speech. And Rick says, I have experienced many people in positions of authority in religion who abuse their power and harm others. Yeah, unfortunately, that's just part of samsara. That's why we're doing this practice. We're trying to purify the mind. So the Buddha says, praise, honor, gain, bitter, vile, obstructive to the attainment of awakening. So yeah, as soon as we have praise, honor, and gain, we have to watch our minds, whether we are in position of authority or we're not. We'll still want, yeah, give me some more of that, more of that, more of that. And then act unskillfully out of consequence. So that happens, unfortunately, across all fields and across all countries. And yeah, you open history books, it's a lot of greed, hatred, and delusion right there since beginningless time. Katie, did you have anything?
Oh yeah, I did have a question. Well, I'm wondering about examples in the suttas of lay people with different attainments, and also if they did that by taking on more of the precepts or more of the rules. It just seems like it would be really hard to do that with being only on 5 or even 8 precepts. I can't remember what's the person's name.
Uga,
yeah. Like wondering if there's more information about people like that and kind of what they did.
Yeah, actually, there's tons. Yeah, we can read. We can do a bunch of different sutta studies on all the householders in the suttas. There are plenty. So actually, when Ajahn Pasanno was here, one of the reflections that he gave was that back at the time of the Buddha, there were more stream mentors that were lay people than there were monastics. And that's because there are more lay people in the world. So yeah, absolutely. This path is, yeah, we have in the suttas, actually even in the Therigatha, there are 2 of the monastics that attain full awakening as lay people and then ordained. Yeah. So obviously, as soon as you attain full awakening, well, it seems pretty much throughout the suttas and the Therigatha and the commentaries, everybody agrees on that. That, yeah, once you have attained awakening, there is no kind of purpose in staying as a lay person. So one would ordain or die, essentially. That's normally to yeah, it's kind of the natural sort of lifestyle that someone who is fully awakened will have. Either attains parinibbana, die in the sense of the body. The body dies and that's it, or they yeah, they take a monastic form, because why would they not? But in terms of the process, of course, it's possible. It really has to do with, to me, what essentially is supportive for our practice. So, for example, for me, it would be extremely complicated as a layperson. I wouldn't be capable. Actually, I kind of somewhat tried doing that, and I didn't find it supportive. So, obviously, it's easier. The Tirigata, obviously, the majority are attained awakening as bhikkhunis, not as lay people. But it is absolutely possible as lay people to follow the path and to, I wouldn't worry too much in terms of like the form. I would worry more about the qualities of mind that you are developing and how the precepts that you're currently holding are supporting you towards the training. And then if at a certain point you feel that you need more precepts, you need more, you find living in a monastery more supportive, etc., then it will kind of be a no-brainer. Okay, great. Yeah, of course, monastic life is perfect. But if you think that just by attaining, just by putting robes on and taking precepts, you will attain awakening, well, afraid to break the news. It doesn't work that way. Actually, the Buddha says as much. If all it took was that, then as soon as babies would be born, we would just wrap them up with like a nice little ochre cloth, and they would all be like all fully awakened. So it's clearly not that. But it's, once again, forms that are symbiotic. So the practice for lay people in Buddhism is designed to revolve around monastics, and the practice for monastics is revolved around, it's designed to be revolving around lay people. You can do anything without lay people. It's insane. I mean, early Buddhism, like everything needs to be offered and so forth. So you have to be in constant connection, right? So it's designed on purpose. So we just, to a certain degree, my view on it is that most of the practice is just surrendering to the forms that the Buddha has designed for us. And then we see maybe that form is a little bit uncomfortable, or maybe we're not making sufficient progress anymore, so we need to switch. So that was my case. I was like, okay, I really think I've used it as much as I could. Now it's time for me to switch. I need more precepts. I need more supports. But yeah, it's definitely possible. So don't worry. The important is the destination.
I think too, it just seems like eventually, if you're like trying to purify your mind more, you would take on more and more precepts. But eventually, I feel like if you take on so many rules, you would just be at some point you would just be like, well, I'm a monastic, you know. So yeah, I was just curious too about these stories, and if they did start to take on more roles, or like some of the householders. Wow.
No. You can make a lot of progress with 5 precepts or 8 precepts. Okay. Yeah, Mahanama actually, if I remember correctly, had all like wife and children, if I remember correctly. But yeah, lots of them were married, having full householder lives. Of course, they also have the incredible paramis of being born at the time of the Buddha. So we should all keep that in mind. So of course, then the Buddha is also capable of teaching, of saying the right, perfect teaching that someone needs in order to make progress in the path. And of course, just the fact that you're born, whether you're a monastic or a householder at the time of the Sammasambuddha, means that you didn't start practicing the day before yesterday, but actually you've been around the block over and over again. So once again, it's not necessarily the precepts per se, but the precepts also taken in the traditional form. At least that has been my experience. Also with the 5 precepts, to be quite frank, before taking them formally. So before I took the 3 refuges and 5 precepts, and I got a Pali name from Biko Bodhi, which was the first religious ritual that I ever did voluntarily out of my own accord in this lifetime. Prior to that, I was on the 5 precepts, but it was very different because I hadn't taken it formally. So that's also how I had also practiced the 8 precepts actually too, because I had gone on retreats. So there's something very beautiful and precious in taking them with that intention of entering the path, becoming the daughter of the Buddha is something extremely powerful. They're designed there to be transformative and to create the conditions also, for example, to have a responsibility towards lay people. The Buddha says over and over again how we are in debt constantly. Forget about like student loans. That's the real debt. You're like, yeah, I have no debts. Ha ha ha. If you become a monastic, you'll be in debt for life. Yeah, the only way you can repay lay people, the Buddha says, is to actually remove all the defilements of mind. There's nothing. I remember that was one of the first things that was very difficult for me, because I was used to give things, and then all of a sudden I didn't have anything to give. And then how do you repay? It was like, oh, how can I repay this? Well, there's no way except for practicing the Dhamma, understanding the Dhamma, realizing the Dhamma. So it's beautiful, actually. It's a very beautiful practice. But one needs to also want to practice in that way. It has to be supportive. Okay. All right. So we're, of course, out of time because I forgot to look at the clock, and we can end, I think, right now with 3 sadhus to respect the sutta. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. May you be well and happy. May all good things come to you.